Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Welcome to part 2 of analyzing the witness testimony of Johnny's libel trial against the Sun in the UK. If you haven't watched part 1 already, I highly recommend that you do, because I do talk about a few housekeeping things in the beginning. I explain a few legal terms that will greatly assist you with understanding the witness testimony process during this trial and in every trial in general. As promised at the end of part 1, we are starting off part 2 by looking at the witness testimony of Samantha McMillan, who is Johnny Depp's stylist and also worked for Amber as a stylist during her relationship with Johnny Depp. I do want to mention that with regards to Samantha McMillan and Kate James, who we will also be talking about in this video, I have covered the details of their witness statements in previous videos. I will be listing them down in the description box, and I'll probably also pop up a few screenshots for you here so that you can direct yourself to those videos if you haven't watched them already. I'm saying this because in the interest of not dragging out videos and making them too long, I will just be summarizing what they've stated in their statements, but we will be considering their testimony in court in a little bit more detail. So Miss McMillan has worked for Johnny as a stylist since 2002. She was a witness during 2 key dates: the 16th of December 2015 and the 24th of May 2016. These dates are very important because they are dates during which Amber was supposedly bruised and injured as a result of a physical altercation with Johnny Depp. Miss McMillan testified that on both these dates, Amber was absolutely injury-free. She maintained her position during her testimony at the trial, despite being shown a number of photographs and text messages or other communications that took place between Amber and a list of other people, including Jody Gottlieb, who was Amber's publicist. I don't know if she's still her publicist right now. Amber's best friend Raquel Pennington, and a Dr. Cowan. In these text messages, Amber repeatedly refers to her bruises and her injuries, and so NGN's defense lawyer, Miss Sasha Wass, relied on them to contradict Miss McMillan's evidence. Now, it's important to mention that during her testimony, Miss McMillan admitted to liking Amber and caring for her, and that she had a good relationship with both Johnny and Amber. This is important because, of course, it goes to her credibility, as it demonstrates that she is an impartial witness. As with the previous witnesses that we discussed in part 1, Wass's MO, or modus operandi, is to accuse every single witness testifying for Johnny of lying and covering for him. And she does the exact same thing with Miss McMillan, stating that she's known Johnny for a very long time, so since 2002 as we discussed, and therefore her loyalties lay with him. Miss McMillan outright denies this, specifically stating that, "I do not know what you're insinuating, but I would not perjure myself for anyone for any reason." With regards to the 16th of December 2015, on the day of the James Corden show, Miss McMillan was asked whether Melanie Iglesias, who was Amber's makeup artist at the time, applied makeup on Amber that was heavier than usual in order to cover up the bruises and the injured lip, to which Miss McMillan responded with, "No, Amber's makeup wasn't any heavier than usual." Wass also relied on text messages sent from Amber to her own mother, in which she again alleges that Johnny hit her and that she was injured. And using all of these text messages, she asked Miss McMillan why Amber would bother lying to so many people if she wasn't stating the truth. She was trying to use this as an argument that McMillan was lying, and that all of these text messages sent to different people corroborate Amber's allegations. Miss McMillan responded that she couldn't answer why Amber would do such a thing, but she maintained her position that Amber was absolutely free of any injuries. Despite doing very well on the stand and maintaining the consistency of her evidence, Mr. Sherborne, Johnny's lawyer, did re-examine Miss McMillan in an attempt to bolster her credibility in the eyes of the court. He did something so incredibly effective. Amber was examined by a nurse on the 17th of December 2015. I mentioned this in part 1 of this series of videos. The only injury that nurse witnessed on Amber was her bleeding lip, which again we discussed was attributed to her dry lips and picking at scabs. You'll remember that the nurse reported that despite Amber's complaints, the nurse was unable to observe any injuries on either Amber's scalp or her face or anywhere. This is where Mr. Sherborne really did an excellent job in convincing the court that his witness was absolutely telling the truth. He asks Miss McMillan if she could think of any reason why the nurse, an impartial medical practitioner, would lie about not seeing any bruises on Amber. Now, of course, Miss McMillan can speculate as to why, but her response here is completely irrelevant. What matters here is that Mr. Sherborne demonstrated to the court that Samantha's testimony and her evidence was completely aligned with that of an impartial medical practitioner. It was in fact Amber's evidence that did not align with the very nurse who examined her on the 17th of December 2015. This nurse, as far as we know, was picked by Amber. She has nothing to do with Johnny himself. She has absolutely no reason to lie or to cover up for Johnny. Mr. Sherborne goes on to ask Miss McMillan point blank, were there a conflict between your loyalty to Mr. Depp and you having to lie to this court? Which would win? To which Miss McMillan responded, I would not commit perjury for any reason, for anyone, friends or family, or anyone, which is exactly what she said to Miss Wass. Overall, another great witness and a great asset to Johnny. Next, we discuss Miss Hilda Vargas, who has been Johnny's housekeeper for over 30 years. By now, I think everyone has heard of the infamous feces incident that took place on the 22nd of April 2016. In summary, Miss Vargas discovered a pile of large feces on Johnny's side of the bed when she went to clean their apartment at the Eastern Columbia building. Ms. Vargas took photos of the feces, and Mr. Kevin Murphy, who was the estate manager of the penthouses, also observed the feces and the photographs, and of course he is there to back up her testimony, but we'll get to him in the next video. Now, Miss Vargas saw Amber on the 24th of May 2016 while she was cleaning at Johnny's West Hollywood property. Amber went there to confront her about the photographs and essentially blamed Miss Vargas for ruining her marriage. Amber goes on to gaslight Ms. Vargas as she did to Johnny on the 21st of May of 2016 and insisted that there was no feces whatsoever on the bed. Initially, Ms. Vargas argued back and said yes, there was, but then because of her fear of Amber's bad temper, she dropped the argument and just let it go. What's really important here is the fact that Ms. Vargas had the opportunity to see Amber in close proximity on the 24th of May of 2016. Because if you'll remember, she was meant to have a large bruise around her right eye and right cheekbone, except Ms. Vargas testifies that she saw Amber, who was clearly makeup-free that day, with no bruises whatsoever. Ms. Vargas really maintained her position that Amber was makeup-free, despite Ms. Wass's attempts to tell her that Amber is a Hollywood actress, she wouldn't risk being caught and photographed outside by the paparazzi without makeup on, etc., etc. The same argument she made with Ms. Esparza, but again, Ms. Vargas maintained her position and said no, she had no makeup on whatsoever. Ms. Vargas ended her witness statement by stating that in her 30 years of working for Johnny, she had never witnessed him being violent towards anyone, and in fact, had never even witnessed him yelling at anyone. Of course, Wass tried to use her usual and, in my opinion, her only argument that Ms. Vargas worked for Johnny for such a long time and she was loyal to him and therefore was biased and covering up for him because he was her sole source of income and because she favored him, just by virtue of knowing him for so long. Ms. Vargas responded by saying that she didn't spend all day with Johnny, she was on a tight work schedule, but when she was around him, she saw a pleasant human being. So this is a great answer from Ms. Vargas because it demonstrates to the court her credibility in the sense that she's not saying he's an angel at all times of the day and night, but he was a good person when she was around. And that's all she can testify to after all. Once again, another good, consistent, and credible witness that I believe demonstrated impartiality in her honesty. And specifically in Ms. Vargas's case, she has the photographs of the feces to back up her testimony. So even if the judge was convinced that she was loyal to Johnny, those photographs are indisputable. Our next witness is Ben King, who was the house manager for Johnny and Amber's property in London in October of 2014, and then again in Australia from February 2015 to August 2015, and finally in Vancouver during the spring of 2016. So he was essentially a butler of sorts. Mr. King stated that during his time working for Amber and Johnny, he started to realize that Amber frequently goaded and provoked Johnny, and he never once witnessed Johnny being unkind or violent towards Amber or anyone. I feel like I'm repeating myself because all of these witnesses who don't really even know each other, right? They work for Johnny, sure, but they've never met, and they all have such consistent testimony. I'm pretty sure that Mr. Ben King never met Tara Roberts, who manages Johnny's island in the Bahamas, but they basically opened their statement with almost the exact same words. So once again, we have consistency here amongst a variety of witnesses. Mr. King further stated that in October of 2014 in London, he was informed that Johnny was a teetotal, so he was abstaining from consuming any alcohol, while Amber regularly drank a bottle or two of wine a night. He also stated that there was only ever one glass of wine that was used when he showed up in the mornings to clean up, and he knew it was Amber's because usually he poured her the glass of wine the night before. Mr. King further stated that he regularly overheard or witnessed Amber and Johnny arguing. According to what he perceived, he stated that Amber was the antagonizer who usually started an argument out of nothing, and Johnny would always attempt to retreat and get away from her by either moving to a different part of the house or going to a different room or even locking himself up in a different room. And whenever he did this, Mr. King testified that Amber would want to continue the argument and follow Johnny around the house wherever he went. However, he did stress that he never witnessed any violent episodes from either of them. And he also wanted to stress that he had a good relationship with both Johnny and Amber. Mr. King was also there in Australia, as I mentioned, during the major fight that broke out between the couple, which ended up in Johnny's severe finger injury. Mr. King was actually the one who found the tip of Johnny's finger amongst the chaos in the house. And he was the one who suggested to Jerry Judge, may he rest in peace, that Amber should be flown back to LA and separated from Johnny. And because he was on good terms with her, Mr. King volunteered to accompany her to LA, to which Amber agreed. Most importantly, Mr. King testified to not having seen any bruising or injuries to Amber's face or body. However, he does submit a second statement in which he says on the flight, he did notice scratches on her arm. He never specified which arm, but he remembers this because he asked her if she would want to cover them up in case the paparazzi were there so that the injuries wouldn't be photographed. One more thing I want to mention about the cuts that he noticed on her arm. He said that they looked like cuts in fairly uniform lines at a sort of diagonal angle downwards. That is most usually a sign of self-harm, because when people self-harm, they have control over the entire process. And most of the time, I'm not saying this is applicable to everyone. I've personally never self-harmed, but I have had multiple friends who have. The cuts do tend to be quite uniform and controlled, rather than random and haphazard if you were violently assaulted by someone else. Another important thing he testified about was Amber's strange question that she posed to him on the flight back to LA, which is whether he was so angry at someone that he just lost it. Now, if you'll remember, Amber kept alleging that Johnny injured his own finger by smashing a plastic phone in the house in Australia. Mr. King testified that as the property manager, he would have known if any phones were smashed or damaged and had to be replaced, and his evidence was that none of the phones were damaged and needed replacing, not even the wall phone that Amber specifically mentioned in her allegations. Now, Was tried to discredit him on two main points. Firstly, she challenged Mr. King's description of Johnny as a very polite and quiet and nice person who was never violent towards anyone. She played the same tactic she played with Tara Roberts, the estate manager of the Bahamas property. Was showed Mr. King the TMZ video. Upon watching it, Mr. King maintained his position that despite what he saw in the video, he never saw Johnny behave in that manner. Now, if you'll remember from part one, Mr. Sherborne re-established Miss Roberts' credibility by having her clarify to the court that she still believed that Johnny would never behave in such a manner towards people, because kitchen cabinets, after all, are not people. The second point in which Was tried to discredit Mr. King is the fact that in his first statement, he stated that he saw no cuts or injuries on Amber, and then in his amended or second statement, he did say that he noticed the cuts on her arm. She specifically alleged that after the commencement of this trial, upon hearing the recording of Jerry Judge, in which he clearly states that Amber did have cuts on her left arm that appeared to be self-inflicted, Mr. King decided to amend his statement purely based on what he heard on the tape. Mr. King maintained that he was simply telling the truth and that he had completely forgotten when he was making his first statement. He said that unlike what Ms. Was was insinuating, he didn't think the two statements were contradicting each other. Rather, he viewed his statements as complementing or completing each other, which I agree with. There are many times when people forget something and then they wish to submit a further statement to include the evidence that they'd completely forgotten about when giving their first statement. It's absolutely normal, happens all the time. Now, in an attempt to reestablish his witness's credibility, Mr. Sherborne refers to the recording or the transcript of Mr. Judge, in which he clearly says that it was Amber's left arm that had the cuts. Now, Mr. King never mentioned which arm it was, and so he is asked again by Mr. Sherborne, "Do you recall which arm it was?" To which he responds, "I don't know." Now, this was again an excellent tactic on Mr. Sherborne's part, because he demonstrated to the court that if Mr. King was in fact lying or was in any way influenced by the recording or the transcript of Mr. Judge, then he too would have specified that it was her left arm. However, even upon being questioned about it at that time in court, after finding out that it was the left arm, he still maintained that he couldn't remember. If he was copying what Jerry Judge was saying, then presumably he would have gone all the way and said, yeah, it was her left arm. But he never did that, which points to the fact that he is simply retelling his recollection of what he perceived, and that it's not in any way tainted or influenced by any of the other evidence that has come to light during this trial. And finally, for today's video, Kate James, who was Amber's personal assistant during the period between March 2012 and February 2015. As I mentioned earlier in this video, I did go through her statement in some detail in a previous video, but in general, her testimony backs up Johnny in the sense that Amber was a verbally abusive person and a liar, and a person who consumed vast quantities of red wine, and also someone who was willing to lie to government authorities such as Australia in order to cover her own behind. In terms of Johnny, Ms. James stated in her evidence that he was always incredibly kind and sweet, even to Ms. James' little boy, and she never witnessed him being abusive or aggressive in any way. She frequently saw Amber completely undressed or mostly undressed, and again testified to have never seen any injuries on her body whatsoever. That's a rough summary of her first statement, but she really dropped a bombshell in her second statement, which was submitted in July, so this month. She reveals in her second statement that when she was 26 years old, she was raped at machete point in Brazil. And this lasted for 5 to 6 hours. Now, she never directly told Amber about this, but Amber overheard her relaying the story to one of her friends, and so she called her into her office at some point in 2013 and questioned her about it. On the 25th of June 2020, Miss James found out through court documents that Amber had apparently stolen her rape story and used it as her own. Now, I know a lot of people want me to comment on this with regards to what's going to happen if it turns out that Amber basically plagiarized Miss James's story and used it as the new horrific allegation that she wants to be heard in private. I can't comment on that because I don't know what Amber is alleging. I don't know to what extent it mirrors Miss James's story. I am inclined to take Miss James's word though, because she was so upset by it that she felt the need to submit this second statement. So I'm not saying that Amber didn't probably make this horrific allegation up completely based on Miss James's story, but I just can't speculate because I have no idea what she's claiming. If we ever find out what it is that she's claiming, of course, I'm going to comment on that. But because it's going to be heard in private, I don't know if we ever will. Only time will tell. I will say, in the grand scheme of things, if it is shown that she completely stole Miss James's story, it doesn't really change the entire argument, which is Amber is a liar who makes things up. I'm sure you can all guess how Miss Wass tried to discredit Miss James. She insinuated that she and Johnny corroborated and conspired together to bring Amber down. She latched on to the fact that Miss James used the word rapey to describe how Amber referred to James Franco, which is the exact word that Johnny used when describing how Amber referred to James Franco. So Miss Wass is insinuating that they were conspiring, and that's why their evidence was completely identical. But their evidence isn't completely identical. They just both used that word because most likely that's the word Amber actually used. And so it stuck with them. If anything, I think it just bolsters Johnny's case because once again, you have another witness whose evidence aligns with Johnny's evidence. Miss James denied this insinuation and stated that she hadn't talked to Johnny since 2015, so for 5 years. Miss Wass contradicts this by referring to a text message that Johnny had sent to Miss James on the 13th of August 2016, so well after their separation and the divorce proceedings had started. The message reads, "Thank you, sweetheart. I'm disgusted that I ever fucking touched that scum. Back on Tuesday and then court. Will hit you when I get back, doll. Come over for a spot of purple and we will fix her flabby arse nice and good. Loveth, Jay." Miss James's response to that was that she had completely forgotten about this exchange because that was many phones ago and she doesn't save her messages, which is completely viable, completely believable. This was a relatively short cross-examination, but Mr. Sherborne did re-examine Miss James nonetheless. Throughout the cross-examination, Miss Wass did imply that Miss James was here to support Johnny and to lie on his behalf. She was painting out Miss James as a disgruntled former employee of Amber's who wanted to bring her down. Now, of course, Miss James directly denied this allegation to Miss Wass. But again, to bolster her credibility in the eyes of the court, Mr. Sherborne asks her a very important question. He asks, "Why are you here to give evidence?" Miss James responded because she was issued with a subpoena. Now, for those of you who don't know, a subpoena is a formal request for a witness to either show up and testify in person or to provide any evidence that they have in their possession. If you disobey or ignore a subpoena, that is an offense. So Mr. Sherborne effectively demonstrated to the court that Miss James is only here because of a subpoena. She's not here of her own volition. She didn't just volunteer her time and her evidence as soon as she found out about this trial. She was summoned through a court process, a subpoena, to provide her evidence. Had she not been issued a subpoena, she probably wouldn't even be testifying. During her re-examination, Miss James further went on to inform the court that she's actually infinitely happier right now and in the last 5 years than she ever was with Amber, because she is now working for an employer in Hollywood who is lovely to her, which is in stark contrast to the way that Amber treated her. So why would she want to go after Amber when she actually did her a favor by letting her go? That's it for today's video. We will start part 3 with the evidence of Kevin Murphy, who was Johnny's estate manager at the penthouses in the Eastern Columbia building. As always, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. The trial is ongoing. We're all on the edge of our seats, waiting to see what else happens. There are so many updates coming left, right, and center. But as I promised you before, I will try to stay on the ball, stay on top of everything, and keep myself updated and provide you with relevant and up-to-date information. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, and I'll catch you in a future video.